What if I told you that the greatest test of faith does not come before the promise, but after it? Most people think faith is required while waiting for a blessing, but what happens when the blessing finally arrives? What happens when the very gift you prayed for becomes the thing I ask you to place in my hands? Genesis chapter 22 is one of the most powerful, emotional, and mysterious chapters in all of Scripture. A father will climb a mountain carrying unimaginable sorrow. A son will walk beside him, carrying wood for his own sacrifice. A knife will be raised. A voice from heaven will intervene, and a ram caught in a thicket will reveal a prophecy that points far beyond Abraham's lifetime. This is not merely a story about sacrifice. It is a story about trust, about surrender, about obedience, and about a future redemption that would one day change the world. After these events, I tested Abraham. Pause for a moment. Notice the wording carefully. This was not punishment. This was not judgment. This was a test. The same man who had left his homeland, the same man who had waited decades for a son, the same man who had trusted my promises through impossible circumstances, would now face the greatest challenge of his life. I called his name, Abraham. Immediately he answered, "Here I am." Those simple words reveal a heart that remained attentive to my voice. Then came the command, a command so shocking that it continues to stir emotions thousands of years later. Take your son, your only son Isaac, the son whom you love, go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Imagine the silence that followed. Imagine Abraham standing there, his heart racing, his mind searching for understanding. This was Isaac, the child of promise, the miracle son, the one through whom nations were supposed to come, the one through whom the covenant was supposed to continue. How could the promise survive if Isaac died? Perhaps that is the very question Abraham wrestled with. Yet Scripture records something astonishing. The next morning Abraham rose early. No argument, no negotiation, no delay, no attempt to change my mind. He prepared for the journey. This does not mean the decision was easy. It means Abraham trusted me even when he did not understand. And that is one of the deepest expressions of faith, trusting when explanations are absent, believing when answers are hidden, following when the destination remains unclear. The journey lasted 3 days. Think about that. 3 days to think, 3 days to wonder, 3 days to wrestle with emotions, 3 days carrying the weight of a command that seemed impossible. Then Abraham saw the mountain in the distance. The moment had arrived. He instructed his servants to remain behind. Then he made a remarkable statement. We will go and worship, and we will return. Notice those words carefully. We will return. Even before understanding how, Abraham believed the story was not over. Faith continued to speak even when circumstances offered no explanation. The wood for the sacrifice was placed upon Isaac's shoulders. The father carried the fire and the knife, and together they walked toward the mountain. What a powerful image, a beloved son carrying wood up a hill of sacrifice. Centuries later, another beloved son would carry wood upon his shoulders up another hill. But that revelation was still hidden within the future. As they climbed, Isaac finally spoke. "Father," Abraham answered, "Here I am, my son." Isaac looked around. The fire was there, the wood was there, Everything required for sacrifice was present. Everything except one thing. Where is the lamb? Perhaps no question in Genesis carries greater prophetic significance. Where is the lamb? Abraham answered with words that would echo through history. God will provide himself a lamb. At that moment, Abraham may not have fully understood the depth of what he was saying, yet those words pointed toward a future far beyond Mount Moriah, a future where I would provide the ultimate sacrifice. The father and son continued together. Eventually they reached the place I had chosen. An altar was built, the wood was arranged. Then came the moment that reveals the extraordinary faith of both Abraham and Isaac. Isaac allowed himself to be bound. Notice something often overlooked. Isaac was no infant, no helpless child. He was old enough to carry the wood, strong enough to resist. Yet Scripture records no struggle, no rebellion, no attempt to escape. Father and son moved together in obedience. Then Abraham laid Isaac upon the altar. The knife was raised. The test had reached its climax. Everything Abraham loved, everything he hoped for, everything he had waited decades to receive, had been surrendered. And then heaven spoke. Abraham, Abraham. Immediately he answered, Here I am. The command came swiftly. Do not lay your hand upon the boy. Do not harm him. Now I know that you fear me, because you have not withheld your son, your only son. The test was complete. The obedience was proven. The faith was revealed. Then Abraham looked up, and there, caught in a thicket by its horns, stood a ram. Provision had arrived, exactly when it was needed. Not a moment early, not a moment late. Exactly on time. Abraham took the ram and offered it in place of his son, a substitute, one life given so another could live. Again, the chapter points toward a greater reality still to come, a future sacrifice, a future redeemer, a future lamb. Abraham called that place Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide. What a beautiful name. Not merely because provision appeared, but because Abraham learned something deeper. Provision is not merely what I give. Provision is who I am. I see the need before it arises. I prepare the answer before the question is asked. I provide what my people need at exactly the right time. Then I spoke once more, this time with an oath, because Abraham had obeyed, because he had trusted, because he had withheld nothing. The covenant blessings were reaffirmed. His descendants would multiply like the stars of heaven, like the sand upon the seashore. Nations would arise, victories would come, and through his seed all nations of the earth would be blessed. Notice the progression. The promise first appeared in Genesis 12. It was expanded in Genesis 15, confirmed again in Genesis 17, and now, after the greatest test of faith, it was reaffirmed with extraordinary power. Obedience did not earn the promise, but obedience demonstrated Abraham's trust in the one who gave it. The mountain experience ended. Father and son descended together. The test was finished. The promise remained, and Abraham returned home forever changed. The chapter closes with what may seem like a small detail, a genealogy, the birth of several relatives within Abraham's extended family. Among those names appears one that will become very important, Rebekah, the future wife of Isaac. Even while Abraham stood on Mount Moriah facing his greatest test, I was already preparing the next chapter of the story. That is another beautiful truth. While people focus on today's challenges, I am already arranging tomorrow's provision. While they face one mountain, I am preparing the next blessing. While they walk through one chapter, I am writing the next. Perhaps the greatest lesson of Genesis chapter 22 is this: true faith is not trusting me only when things make sense. True faith is trusting me when obedience is costly, when answers are unclear, when emotions are heavy, when the future is uncertain. Abraham discovered that surrender does not lead to loss when it is placed in my hands. It leads to greater blessing, greater revelation, and greater intimacy with me. On Mount Moriah, Abraham learned that I am Jehovah Jireh, the God who provides, the God who sees, the God who remains faithful, and the God who would one day provide the ultimate lamb for the salvation of the world. If this story has deepened your understanding of Scripture, subscribe to Primordial Lore and continue exploring the greatest stories ever told. And now, continue to the next chapter, where Sarah's earthly journey comes to an end. Abraham purchases a burial place in the Promised Land, and a new season begins for the covenant family.